Oh hi, welcome to Aquatazoo, where we like to nerd out over all things zoo and aquarium related. I'm l.semple, and today I'd like to talk to you a little bit about animal encounters. When I say animal encounters, I don't necessarily mean when you go to a zoo or aquarium and you see animals. I mean the little bit more in-depth type of programming that you might not have seen or might not have been aware is a thing. I've spoken about animal ambassadors before, and these are the animals that tend to be in close contact with visitors, with guests, and they're a select group based on their temperament, their species, their training, their overall okayness, I suppose, with being handled and touched, and them staying calm no matter what people are doing with all their noise and movement, right? If they're nearby, they're sharing space. There are certain animals that don't do well with sharing space with, say, a third grade class who's being very loud and screaming, and they're excited and they're hopping all over the place. Some animals are not comfortable with that, right? I can also say that I probably wouldn't be comfortable with that either. But we've got animal ambassadors who have been trained and have been chosen specifically for this type of job so that our institutions can bring them out to meet people, and people can get a little bit of a closer look, maybe even touch depending on what the situation is, and just kind of interact on a closer level with these animals and learn a little bit more, ask questions in a kind of smaller, more intimate format. And these are known as animal encounters. These programs can look different depending on the facility or on the animals involved or on the point of the program itself. So when you take an animal ambassador out to an outreach program, that's a little bit different than if you kept the animal on site and just allowed them to interact with guests while in your facility, right? So in general, the interactions where the animal is in kind of a familiar space, it might not be its exhibit or its usual enclosure, but it might be a space that they have worked in a lot or they've been trained in, or generally just they're familiar with it. Like they know all the nooks and crannies and all the cool things to see and the places where they can go to feel a little bit more secure if they ever need it, right? So those two types of programs, one in an area that is familiar to the animal, may not be their necessarily home space, but it might be something kind of adjacent, and the programs that happen off-site where the animal doesn't really know what's going on, where they are, or what's happening. They're very different, and we handle those in different ways with different types of training. But they're both kind of animal encounters, right? So guests can, depending on the animal and the person running the program and the whole point of it, they might be able to come up and approach close and take a look. They might even be able to gently touch, depending on the animal again, and learn a little bit more about that animal, because we as humans tend to learn more and really make a connection with things when we put our hands on them. So that's, even though we know it's not necessarily in the animal's best interests at all times to be touched by a person, it is important. Like, for instance, when kids are learning the importance of animals and what they are and what they're doing and why they should care, sometimes having touch as an option really fosters a particular type of learning that we're hoping that we can tap into as designers of programs, as managers of zoos and aquariums. I personally, for instance, don't like touch pools. I do not like them because they're very hard on the animals, right? I'm looking at it from the animal care side, and I just have issue with them. I understand why they're very important, because people kind of forge a different type of connection with animals if they can lay a finger on them, if they can touch them and realize that, oh, it's kind of slippery, or it's really soft, or it feels like tree bark, or, whatever they're feeling. They're like, oh, that's really interesting. Because oftentimes some of these animals, at least in a touch pool situation, they feel different than they look, right? And so learning happens through touch, and it makes people learn more and encourages them to care more. So even though I understand that, I have an issue with them because it's hard on animals to be touched a lot, especially aquatic animals that may not have, fur or scales to protect them. So I understand what's going on and why we do it, and I've run touch tanks my whole career, but I'm not a fan. But every facility that I've worked at has had them, and there's good reason for that. Research does show that people make a better connection with animals if they can kind of get their hands on them, not in an aggressive way, but just, touching them. So they learn that they're not scary, right? They learn that they're not anything to be afraid of. The animals are not going to do anything to them, right? So this kind of animal encounter is important to learning and to kind of make those connections with those animals so that people will actually care and make better decisions on behalf of that animal that they touched one time in the touch pool. But I've gotten a little bit off topic now because I'm going into why it's important to have animal ambassadors and why we continue to have these sorts of touch or interaction kind of programs and the purpose of them, essentially. But I want to talk about like how they're run. What are we doing? How do we decide which animal's going where and what kind of program we should make with them in mind, right? So, like I mentioned, we've got the on-site kind of interaction program encounter, and then we've got the off-site one. So the off-site one tends to be a little bit more stressful, again, because this animal is going into an area that they don't recognize. They haven't marked it as their own. There's a lot of different smells and noises and lights and all these other things, and there's only so much that the caretakers that are with the animal at that time can do to make them comfortable, right? So they cannot necessarily control the temperature except for in like the vehicle. They can't necessarily control the lights or the way that the room is set up. There's mild control. They can control some of that, but they can't control everything about it. So if somebody had just gone through this room and sprayed everything down with bleach before the animal came in, sure, we can try and clean that up as best we can, but at the same time, that animal is going to be basically punched in the face with bleach smell the entire program that they're doing, and that might be distracting for them. That might be annoying. That could actually kind of burn their eyes and soft tissues a little bit, right? And we may not notice it because we're humans and we're like, oh, it just smells like bleach. It smells clean. But animals have different sensory experiences than we do, right? And, even humans have different sensory experiences than one another. So what might be annoying to me may not bother somebody else, and vice versa. So we always have to be cognizant of that kind of thing. And so that's one of the things that makes these off-site programs, these animal encounters, a little bit more difficult. And also, a lot of times when we go on these outreach programs, we have limited information about what we're going to encounter when we're there. So we try to make all these preparations and plan B and plan C and D and E and F in case the situation does not turn out to be what we were told it was, which is like you got a 50-50 shot. Sometimes it is what they say it's going to be. Sometimes it's definitely not. And so we have to act with the animal's best interests in mind. And so whenever we have an animal out doing an encounter, like the people who are handling that animal are watching very, very closely. They're on one hand trying to educate the people that are coming into this encounter experience with this animal and trying to figure out at the same time how comfortable that animal is. And so they'll understand, hopefully they're familiar enough with the animal involved that they will recognize when things are getting a little hectic and the animal is starting to look a little stressed out. And then we'll end the program right there. One additional factor that we have to take into consideration is just the transport itself, moving that animal from point A to point B. It could be in a wagon going to a classroom on the facility's grounds. It could be being carried by hand. It could be in a car or a truck transported long distances. We do this kind of stuff, but we try to do that with the animal's comfort in mind, and using animals that are known to handle this okay. Like, being in the car is not scary. I'm sure you've seen it with dogs, that there are some dogs who really love a car ride, and there's some dogs who automatically think that they're going to the vet and they start to freak out. So we probably wouldn't take that dog, the one who's freaked out by being in the car. We'd probably take the one that enjoys being in the car ride, right? And there are some animals that do. So we try to choose the animals carefully, and then so we'll try to select one that doesn't mind the transport at the very least, and then once they get there, they're still chill. They're still relaxed. Everything's fine. And so you're kind of starting from square one as far as stress goes, and the animal did not mind the transport, so they're just kind of chilling there. They don't necessarily mind the unfamiliar surroundings, and they're okay with what's happening. That's a good ambassador animal, and a good animal for an animal encounter program. I just said the word animal so many times. But yeah, so we try to select the animal carefully. And then we also try to put some good training to use to help the animal through the experience. So this isn't the pinnacle of what the animal probably wants a lot of the time. Some animals do really enjoy programs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But sometimes the animals are just being their wild animal selves and putting up with us and all of our shenanigans, and moving them around, and letting people touch them and stuff. And so the animal may not love it, but they put up with it because there's some good treats involved. This is good enrichment. They're kind of curious about people as much as the people are curious about the animal. There are good aspects of it too, but to make it a little bit easier, we try to go with training. So the animal and the caretaker at that time hopefully have built some sort of relationship to start with, so that this is not a stranger carrying me around or holding me or presenting me to these people. This is somebody who is trained to work with this animal and has also built a good trusting relationship between themselves and the animal. So that means that they have been working together behind the scenes, probably in the zoo or aquarium. They've been just kind of getting to know one another, learning to communicate together, and so that the animal feels a little bit more comfortable. Even though they're not in a familiar area, they're with a familiar person. And so if they have a trusting relationship with that person, they know that that person's not going to let them get hurt or keep them out too long or let them get too stressed, right? That person is there to protect them. So they can feel a little bit more at ease. And also, the snacks are coming. Not all animals are getting snacks during programs, but either it happens during the program or it probably happens right after the program. There's going to be some good snacks involved. And let me tell you, I will do a lot of things that I don't necessarily love just to get some snacks. So the other type of program where an animal has access to shared space kind of adjacent to their home enclosure, I suppose, that's a little bit different. I have experienced this one with penguins specifically, and it is adorable. So a keeper, you'll set it up ahead of time where there's like this space, hopefully that's set aside, where animals can enter a space or a room with the people who kind of wanted to do the program, and then the animal kind of walks around and interacts with them as it chooses. Now, that we don't let animals bite and chew and stuff on people, but they might play with toys that the visitors, the people, are holding, or they might just walk around and weave between their feet and stuff like that. It's kind of a fun experience. Like I said, I've done it with penguins, and there were a lot of little cat toys and shiny things all littered around the room, just to make the penguins a little bit more interactive, or entice them to be a little bit more interactive. So they seem to like shiny things and like basically cat toys, little things, little puff balls on sticks. And there were also small like dog glues in the corner, like the little plastic igloo shaped housing that you can get at the pet store for dogs, but in this case it was for penguins. But in the corners, those were sitting there, A, because they're cute, B, because it gives the penguins somewhere to go if they're suddenly not feeling comfortable for some reason. So if you have a guest who's in an animal encounter room situation like this, where the penguin comes in and is kind of wandering around and a guest flinches or does something that makes the animal uncomfortable, they have a place where they can go and not be seen and just get away where the people are not going to get to them. So the animal has more control over the situation if they need it. So the keepers are usually there. Oh, they're definitely there for this one, but they will ask for animals to come off exhibit and participate in the program. And when you talk to a keeper who does this kind of stuff, there's always one animal that is generally down for whatever kind of program and encounter that is planned for the day. They just generally kind of like checking things out, checking people out, seeing what's new in the animal encounter room. So they'll probably be the first ones in line to go check out what's happening. And so it's very predictable, and you'll have the same animals participating all the time. You'll also have some animals that refuse to participate pretty much ever, and that's okay. They're just like people. They might be introverted and extroverted just like us. I mean, at least that's what it looks like when you're looking at these animals exhibiting these behaviors. Your more extroverted animals will generally be just fine wandering around, interacting, playing with the toys that people have, and posing for pictures and stuff. But your more introverted animals just want to be on their exhibit with their little buddies, and that's where they want to stay. And that's 100% okay. A key portion of running animal encounters is voluntary service, I guess. These animals are doing it because they have chosen to. So for AZA, we try to make sure that our animal ambassadors, where sensible, they have some choice about their participation in programs and being an animal ambassador. So we have animals that may be on site that are labeled, quote unquote, as animal ambassadors. That is their job. But unless they're on a program, they're just chilling. You know, they are in the back living their lives. They have an exhibit, or an enclosure at least, that's as interesting as the exhibits might be that are facing the guests, but they're just back there hanging out, eating snacks, doing their thing. And then they may be offered a chance to come out and do an encounter program. And they may choose to go, they may choose not to go. And there's lots of different ways, depending on the type of animal, that you can figure out whether an animal is voluntarily going on an excursion. If they are volunteering to go and interact with people, or if they're just gonna prefer to sit, right? And be in their enclosure in the zoo or aquarium. And so it might be, the signal might be the door opening. If they come up to the door, then they're signaling to their trainer, yeah, let's go. Or if they touch a target or something like that. Like, we basically work with these animals and train them up so that they understand that if they do this one thing when the question is asked of them, basically, however that might be, if a target's presented or if the door opens, however the trainers want to signal to the animal that if you do this, that means we're going on a program. If you do this, that means we are going to interact with strangers. Some animals are totally fine with that. And it's a good thing to have enough animal ambassadors to be able to give them the option and also plan accordingly. Not every animal is going to want to go, and by giving them the choice, we're limiting who's available at any one given time, right? So I might plan to take a rabbit out on an encounter with guests, but the rabbit has decided that it does not want to go. But then we have this possum over here who is interested in going. So not necessarily labeling what program is happening when is a common tactic if you don't know if you're going to get the animal of your choice to want to participate today. We all have good days and bad days. There are some days where I don't want to talk to another human being ever. But there are some days where I'm totally fine with that. So it's the same kind of thing, and we try to offer the animals a similar type of choice in their participation, even though this is quote unquote their job. We like to give them choices about whether they would like to participate or not. Now, even when people are interacting with animals in their enclosure or as part of their enclosure, we still try to give that option, and you'll notice it when say you're standing in a bird area where there's free flight birds around you. Some of them may opt to come down and interact with you and sit on your shoulder or eat some birdseed right in front of you or pose for a beautiful picture. They may choose to do that, and that's fine, but you better believe there's tons of other birds in there who have opted to not interact with you, and that's okay. We just hope that as you meander through the aviary, that you will find at least a couple of birds who are willing to grace you with their presence. We do the same thing for aquatic touch pools. We try to make an area for the animals to go where they're out of reach of people or they're covered. We, at my facility where I'm at, give our animals a break, so we'll cover portions of our touch pool for periods of time to just give them a break without being poked and prodded and touched. And the animals do very well. And if they don't want to be touched, even though they're not on a break period, they can move to the back of the exhibit where nobody's going to bug them. So we do try to offer some choice, some control where we can for animals that are doing these programs, because it is a non-natural thing that we're asking them to do. And it's only fair that we give them some choice about how this goes down. It is for that reason that you may see advertisement for an animal program that's happening in a certain area where there's an animal encounter that's going to happen, but you may not know what type of animal it is. They may not label what's going to happen because they need to ask the animal if they want to participate. And it might be that they get an animal to participate, but it might not be the one that was scheduled for that time slot that we were aiming for, right? Sometimes that happens, and that's okay. So we try to leave it a little bit more ambiguous. So I may want to take the rabbit out right now, but the rabbit does not want to go out right now. And now I've ended up with a snake, and that's okay. Because the snake was down with doing whatever we were going to do. And so we try to go with the animals that are willing to do the program just because they're generally more chill during the program because they have opted for this. And we've kind of made some sort of understanding between the trainer and the animal that this is what's going to happen. If you want to go, crawl up on this log and we're going to pull the log and you're going to go out on a program. So if an animal chooses to do that, that is a much more agreeable animal for that program than an animal that we grabbed from an enclosure by force and placed on that log. You know what I mean? So we try to incorporate choice where we can, and it's not a perfect system, but we try. And we're always looking for ways to get better about this because we do want the animals to have choice in this. Yes, their job might be to be an animal ambassador, and we're going to work on that with them, but ultimately, if we are ending programs early, if we're not able to get an animal to participate, we may just give them a different job. They might become an exhibit animal instead, and we may try to find a different animal who's a little bit more upbeat about going and meeting people. So we try to make sure that the animals are healthy and or at least low stress, maybe not stress-free, but low stress. And we try to take whatever precautions that we can to make sure that the animal is comfortable, that the trainer is comfortable, that the animal encounter in general is organized, and that the people that are participating in the program in this encounter, whether it's just a close look or touching or allowing the animal to approach you, whoever is in that program, that they have a good experience, because that is really important to us as zoo and aquarium professionals. We want you to have a good experience while learning about animals and their habitats and their behaviors and all the cool stuff that they can do. And we want you to have a deeper understanding of why that animal is important and how you can help their wild counterparts in their natural habitat. And we do provide that sort of information while these programs are happening. Now, whether anybody hears any of that because they're so enamored with a cool animal, debatable. But if you make a connection with a guest about an animal and they just want to know more, that's a good thing. That's what we're aiming for. Even a little bit of learning is excellent. That's the whole point. We're not trying to torture any animals. We're not trying to force them to do anything that they don't want to do. We're trying to get them to understand what their choices mean, first of all, and then allow them the choice to participate or not. They may not love being touched. They may not love approaching people with all their noise and their quick movements. But some animals are down with it and they don't mind. And we want to make sure that people have the opportunities to interact with and learn about animals as much as we can, since we are aware that some people learn best by actually interacting with an animal. So if we can offer that opportunity, we will. So if this kind of thing sounds like something you'd be down with, I would definitely check with your favorite zoo or aquarium and see what kind of animal encounter programs they might have, and see if there's a way that you can get in on that. So they might just have them ongoing at the zoo or aquarium throughout the day in various locations. It might be a book ahead only type of thing, or a signature event kind of thing where you have to pay a little bit of extra money, but you probably get a really good really good quality encounter in a small group that will be a little bit more comfortable for the animal because it's a small group, and comfortable for you because it's just your party dealing with this animal. So these are possibilities. Oh, and if it's a school, there's also possibly outreach programs where we bring the animals to you rather than you coming to see the animals, because we also understand that not everybody has the ability to come to our facilities and look around. Some of them are expensive, and not everybody's got that kind of disposable income. So we try to make our services available with the most agreeable animals within reason, so that people can still interact and see some cool animals doing cool animal things, but not necessarily having to shell out the money to come in and look at the zoo or aquarium, because it's part of being in a community and serving a community. We want to make sure that we're still reaching people who may not be able to normally come to us. Plus, it might just be more comfortable for the people to stay where they are and we bring the animal to them. It happens. So those are all the reasons that we might run an animal encounter. It's not always my favorite thing, but when an animal and a person, a guest, makes a connection, it's great. If they can make a connection and understand why the animal's important and how to protect the animal, that's what we're all here for. We want to make sure that people are getting a good chance to learn about animals and their habitats and the choices that they can make that affect those habitats. So it's just a good way to get all of the moving parts into one space and forge a deeper connection than simply looking from a window into an animal's enclosure and seeing them, nibbling on some fruit, right? If they're doing that right in front of you, or you get to hand them the fruit or something like that, that's a totally different situation. And zoos and aquariums do have these kinds of programs available a lot of the time. It may take different forms and involve different animals, and some facilities are willing to let guests do more than others. But generally, this is a situation where an animal has been trained. A keeper and an animal have built a trusting relationship, so they know where to draw the line and where to shut the program down, and where we try to make the animals comfortable as possible. And then, of course, there are rules for the guests, too, because we don't want them, jumping up at the animals and scaring them. So it's a kind of controlled interaction program where we hope that guests come, enjoy, learn something new, and really develop a deep appreciation for the animal. So that's your animal encounter. If you have any questions about that or any other zoo or aquarium things, feel free to write it up in an email and send it to me at aquatazoo@gmail.com. If you're enjoying the show, and I hope that you do, don't forget to follow or subscribe on your podcast player of choice. That way you'll get all of the sweet, sweet content as soon as it releases. If you'd like to support the podcast directly, you can find me on patreon.com/aquatazoo. And if you're looking to take a vacation and you don't know where to start, I can help you. I happen to be a personal vacation advisor with Magical Vacation Planner, and I would love to help you out. It does not cost you anything extra. The links are in the show notes. Okay, thanks for listening. I heart your faces. Okay, bye.